Yeah.
Go.
What we could do now is just, with the SLR, try some more standing offhand, then go into the kneeling position, down to the lying position, then back up again, just changing positions between groups. See, the difference between this and the 5.6, this really rocks you. Shot the steak in half.
You aiming for the right hand one, weren't you?
Yeah, I switched up to the top left. See the handguards? That's the first pattern handguards. When they get hot, they actually start smoking. It'll cool down a bit. That was the problem with the old wooden handguards. You get a tremendous amount of smoke even after 20 rounds rapid, which can be a bit disconcerting. Okay, this is going to be a long video. I'm trying to get it down to 12-15 minutes, but it's just not possible. It's a video that's been requested more often than any of the others that I've posted and withdrawn, and it's to do with the L1A1 self-loading rifle. There's been a huge amount of interest and inquiry from America, interestingly enough. This rifle does seem to have really captured the imagination of the American shooting community, and there's a number of groups who are avid collectors and users of this rifle. It's very similar in a lot of ways to the M14, the American M14, but in my humble opinion it's a better rifle, and it's more enjoyable to shoot, and it seems to be vindicated by the uptake with American shooters. Now, firstly, the rifle we'll be talking about in this series of videos will be this one, which is the Lithgow manufactured L1A1. Lithgow being the Australian manufacturers. They manufactured all the rifles for themselves and also for the New Zealanders. Most of them produced in the 1960s, early 1960s. This rifle came into service to replace what the New Zealand Army had been using, which was the Enfield. We used the number 3 and the number 4 right the way through the Second World War. Post-war, with our area of strategic interest sort of collapsing in from Europe into Southeast Asia and having a battalion based in Singapore, this was the rifle that was used by our infantry battalions. Can't swear to this, but I suspect the Australians were still using the number 3 star, the Lithgow manufactured number 3 star. They didn't manufacture any of these, and they didn't use the number 4 rifle during the course of the Second World War either, where the New Zealanders had number 3, number 4, and then this, the Jungle Carbine number 5. During the 1950s, FN introduced their version, the FN self-loading rifle, and the New Zealanders trialled that rifle along with the British and Australians during the Malaya campaign, and also confirmed the trials during the confrontation with Indonesia in and around Borneo in the 1960s. So that's what we had, and that's what it was replaced with. As you can see, a much more substantial rifle in terms of dimensions, and a much more effective rifle, being self-loading, firing from a 20 round box magazine. The rifle saw most of its service in our part of the world, the Australasian area in Southeast Asia. As I say, we had a battalion based in Singapore. Also, the Australians and New Zealanders had a task force in South Vietnam, and this was the standard service rifle both for the Australians and New Zealand infantry battalions and companies, as well as for the Special Air Service, although they made some significant modifications, which I'll talk about in a wee while. The rifle continued to serve right the way through to about 1985. at the time, as a result of our Vietnam experience, both the Australians and the New Zealanders were kind of unusually employing two different standard service rifles in their infantry platoons. Riflemen being armed with the Lithgow manufactured SLR, and section commanders, platoon commanders, radio operators, people like that being issued with the M16. The M16 was used by lead scouts because it had the automatic capability, and the IA, in the event of a contact, was for the scout just to empty a magazine. And the general direction of the NOGs, keep their heads down while the rest of the section came up to support them. Platoon commander had one principally as a means of initiating ambushes. Ordinarily, ambushes would be initiated with claymore mines, banks of claymores, but the clackers were a bit susceptible to moisture getting into them, and sometimes it didn't work. So the alternate signal for springing the ambush was the platoon commander, section commander, depending on what the size of the ambush was, firing a burst into the killing ground, and that was a signal that the ambush was to be sprung. So it caused obviously some logistical problems, having two different calibers. Resupply gets quite complicated. In any event, this rifle was withdrawn from service with the New Zealanders in about 1985, and we then had a period of 2 or 3 years where we all had M16s. That rifle was then withdrawn from service, and we were re-equipped with the Austrian Steyr AUG, again manufactured by Lithgow in Australia. And they are at the moment manufacturing the new variant of the AUG to replace the one that's been in service for the last sort of 20-25 years. The rifle is modelled on the British version of the FN. The rifles used in Malaya were Fabrique Nationale manufacture. The British had a look at that, did their assessment, and made a few modifications. In the first instance, they removed the automatic capability as a complete waste of time, waste of ammunition. Full cartridge 7.62x51, it really is uncontrollable, just a screaming waste of ammunition. That is the most significant modifications the Brits made. You'll also see that there's a much longer version of the flash eliminator than you'll find on most of the European or South American rifles. So overall it's a little bit longer, and it's single shot only. Also, this particular rifle has been refurbished. I bought it as New Zealand Army surplus. The barrel was shot out, which is pretty much the case for most of the rifles that were released into the civilian market, unless they'd come from the Air Force armoury, where the Air Force only really used them for drill. So if you're lucky enough to get an Air Force SLR, it'll probably still be in good shootable condition. The Army ones, the barrels were just shot to hell. Found a replacement barrel in the United States. In addition to having it rebarreled and tuned, I've also put the original wood furniture back on. This is as it was from the first mark, and it served up until probably the late 1960s, where they changed the pattern of foregrip. The issue being, and the British found this as well, it's completely wood, it's one piece. It's kind of a triangular profile. It has ventilation slits cut into it, and it's retained in the front by a screw which passes right through the body of the rifle and retains the two halves of the foregrip. When the wood gets wet, it's inclined to swell and then shrink as it dries, then swell again, and this area was very susceptible to cracking around the screw. Those cracks would eventually radiate out, exacerbated by recoil, and you'd get complete separation of this area from the handguard, which is not a desirable thing because the thing falls off. They replaced that in the late 1960s, early 1970s with a second pattern of handguard, which you can see here. It's a rounded profile, in the same way that the original M16 was kind of a triangular profile. Then they replaced it with the later versions, much more rounded, a little bit more comfortable to use. They've drilled holes rather than slots in the wood for ventilation, which makes it a little bit stronger. But the most important thing is they've done away with wood completely at the front, and they've used sheet metal to solve that problem of cracking. Also, around the back here, this area, that's also sheet metal, because this is something else which is very susceptible to damage. They've lined the interior with a heat resistant material which was absent in the initial pattern, and under rapid fire or extended fire, as I've found out, this thing starts radiating heat massively, and you get a tremendous amount of smoke coming off the wood. So If you can find this pattern furniture, which is Slazenger manufacture, it's the Australian tennis making company, they're the people that did the wood, it's getting very difficult to find and it's very expensive. If you find it, by all means dress the rifle up to take it back to its classic configuration. I think it looks great. But if you're going to shoot it, it's a simple matter of taking off the original handguards and stick on the number 2 pattern. You won't get the smoke problem and you won't get the problem associated with cracking and damage. If you lose these or break these, it's going to be very expensive for you to replace them. Similarly with the carrying handle, this one is wood. It's the original pattern. They replaced that very quickly with a plastic version because this cracks, chips and falls off if you look at it sideways. In Vietnam, you'll find the New Zealand Australian rifles, particularly Kiwi rifles, very often this has been taken off. It's either been cut off or the armourers have removed it. This is to avoid soldiers getting lazy and carrying the rifle around in this fashion. The doctrine which we inherited from the British Army, very, very strict, was that soldiers move around with the rifle in both hands in the patrol position, ready to go, particularly important in close country. So just to remove temptation and potentially bad habits, quite often you'll find these rifles have had the carrying handles removed. Now it was manufactured in a whole, just an enormous number of different variants. The Canadians had theirs, the Brits had theirs, the Australasians had ours, the Brazilians were making them, the Mexicans were assembling them from parts, the Israelis had a version, which I'll show you in a second. There's a huge variety of different types of configuration in the FM platform. I believe, from what I've seen at the gun shows in America, most of the rifles that are available for you guys are either South American or European. But just be aware, you have to make a choice depending on what spares are more easily available to you to go for the Imperial, which is all the British Commonwealth manufacturers, versus the metric specification, which will be European and South American, because the parts are not necessarily interchangeable. So you can pick your poison. The differences between the British/Kiwi Australian rifles over the European rifles are largely cosmetic. They're to do with the position of the cocking handle, the sight configuration, some of the controls, and the flash eliminator. Now I'll show you what I mean. Let's go and grab this in a second. This is an Israeli FN. Pretty easily recognisable because of its signature foregrip. It's half wood and half sheet metal. This particular rifle was originally configured as a light support weapon. It was an automatic, fully automatic, squad automatic weapon. What we have done is got rid of the bipod and converted it to semi-automatic so that I can shoot it. We're not allowed to shoot full auto in this country. You can have full auto if you've got a collector's license, but you can't shoot them under any circumstances. So that's what we have done. You can see the differences that I was talking about. Firstly, the rear sight doesn't fold away, and that makes this thing a little bit more susceptible to damage. The sight profile with the bunny ears and the foresight post is different. The books that I've read, the experts, the people that really know what they're talking about, rate the Commonwealth version of the sights as the best sights that you can get. If we roll the rifle over, you'll see that the cocking handle protrudes. It's a fixed cocking handle, it doesn't fold away, as I'll show you on the Brit and Aussie version, and that makes it just a little bit susceptible to catching if you're moving through vegetation. The controls are slightly different also. The safety catch position here is not as good, not as accessible as the Brit Australian version. The magazine release is in just a slightly awkward place, and there is a hold open device which again just slightly different from what you'll find on the Antipodean and English version. So it's up to you, you can pick your poison. There is in this country a group of people who are specialising in collecting the South African Rhodesian or African FNs, and I believe that is the case in the United States as well. There seems to be a lot of interest in the Bush War period and the rifles that were used in that period. We've got a lot of immigrants here from Zimbabwe and South Africa. Most of the Zimbabweans were basically ethnically cleansed, pushed out with nothing. They've come to New Zealand in very large numbers, and they'd probably be our most successful migrant group. It's just been seamless integration, and that's also the case with the South Africans. So there's a lot of guys down here who used their version of the FN as their service rifle, mostly the national service, and where possible they've been trying to get hold of their version of the rifle. You'll see a lot of guys with it painted out in the camouflage pattern that was used by the Rhodesians. Okay, what else should we talk about? Just with respect to the controls, why this rifle I think is the pick of the litter as far as the FN family. The safety catch is very ergonomic. It's very, very large, located on the side here, and easily operated with the thumb. It means that you can patrol with your thumb on the safety catch, constantly checking to see that you've got it on, and yet if you have to bring the rifle up for a snapshot, it's an effortless motion in releasing the safety catch. This Israeli gun, on the other hand, has got a more subtle and slightly shorter safety, and it's just a bastard to get to. You really have to reach for it and change your hand position. It's potentially a little bit life-threatening. The magazine release, for people who aren't used to the rifle, it takes a little bit of getting used to. You operate it with the thumb, push it forward, and you roll the magazine off. Similarly, roll it back on. It's pretty easy to tell when the thing's on, but if you're used to the straight pull type magazine system, this takes a little bit of getting used to. There is a hold open device co-located with the magazine release, and that is because this rifle does not, the magazine's obviously empty, the rifle doesn't retain the working parts to the rear when the magazine is empty. It does with some of the aftermarket magazines, but the standard military issue box magazine, it does not. So, for inspection purposes, you have to operate the hold open device with your finger as you cock the rifle. I mentioned before the cocking handle, it folds away, folds out for cocking, can be flicked away when you've cocked the rifle, and that just keeps the profile and the rifle nice and streamlined. There's a bit of a knack to, again, it's just technique and learning how to do it, but when you open the cocking handle and go to cock the weapon, the trick is to keep it moving back in one motion and not do a thing called ride the cocking handle. If your hands are on the cocking handle as it moves forward, it can prevent the bolt and the bolt carrier from going fully into battery, in which case the trigger mechanism will not operate, the rifle will not shoot. So they're very insistent in basic training with recruits, etc. just to riff the rifle and let the spring do all the work to return the bolt to its correct position. The sights, which we mentioned, it's a larger aperture, slightly larger aperture on the Britain Australian version than it is with South American rifles. On all of them, they push through a series of stops, 100 metre increments up to 600 metres. Zeroing is achieved by adjusting the screw for lateral movement of your group. And just on that point, one of the things which you absolutely must have, you buy one of these rifles, is you've got to get yourself a cleaning kit with the combination tool. You'll need this for zeroing and for other purposes as well. It's a very, very useful bit of kit. Moving forward, we've got the gas parts. This is a system that allows you to regulate the flow of gas into the working parts. It's set up so that you can adjust it from 0 to 10. After cleaning and before firing, that should be set back on the position either 6 or 7. Once you start firing, the weapon starts getting glommed up with crap and carbon. You'll kind of feel it. Then the weapon may stop. You cock it, fire it again, it may fire 1 or 2 rounds, stop again. The IA is just to turn that gas setting down to increasing the gas flow to the working parts, and that'll get things working again. The gas regulator, if it gets sticky, and it is sticky at the moment, it should be easily movable with the thumb, but obviously it needs a bit of a clean. Your combination tool has a small wrench, little hook, and if things get really dramatic and you can't move that, then you use your wrench just to ratchet the gas regulator around and get around it that way. The foresight is, as I mentioned, the sights, according to the experts, are the best. It's adjustable up and down for zeroing, and again there is a part to the toolkit, the tail end of one of the screwdrivers on the toolkit, which enables you to drop that over the top of the foresight and wind it up or down, either to increase or depress the mean point of impact for your group. The tricky bit if you are buying one of these rifles, and one of the things you have to keep your eye on is that, show you the front of the rifle, that foresight is retained with a very small grub screw. It pays to give that a really good tweak before you start shooting and after shooting, because if it comes out, falls out, the foresight will then start rotating under recoil and it'll drop out as well. You lose your zero, you lose your foresight, the rifle is completely useless. So just a word to the wise, keep an eye on that. There is a gas plug, and again when we go on to strip and assemble I'll show you how this works, but I've seen on 2 YouTube videos new users of the FN family of rifles strip their rifle, clean it, take it out for a shoot for the first time, and the rifle fire one shot and then not cycle. And it's simply because they've reinstalled the gas plug upside down. It's a very easy mistake to make. On this particular one there is a white line which is visible, but in all of them there is a groove cut into the top of the gas plug, and that must always face upwards. It's perfectly possible to install this upside down. Like I say, if you do that the rifle ain't going to work, so you have to make sure that is up the right way. We have this rather exaggerated length on the flash eliminator that it also retains the bayonet boss. This is a long rifle overall compared to what it was up against in the day in the form of this Chinese Type 56, the AK-47 type. Incidentally, this one and this literally went head to head in Vietnam. The gentleman carrying this particular rifle is no longer biologically viable. He was killed in 1968 in an ambush, as evidenced by the claymore pellets that are still in the rifle and the gouging on the stock. They cleaned them out. Operation Coburg, 1968, killed 5 VC, and that's one of the weapons that one of the veteran bringback rifles. But when we're talking about overall length, there it is. If you add a bayonet to this rifle, what is a long heavy rifle suddenly becomes extremely long and extremely heavy. Alright, now as far as the history of the rifle, its employment, again, when I joined the army in 1980, most of my instructors were Vietnam veterans. New Zealand infantry that were sent to Vietnam were all regular force professional soldiers. They were not conscripts, as were probably 50% of the Australian troops that were sent. So being professional soldiers, they hung around in the army after they'd done their Vietnam service. Most of them had done at least 2 tours. And they were still there right up to, well into the 1980s at the rank of Sergeant, Staff Sergeant, CSM. It was commonplace to have Vietnam vets. So a lot of what I've learnt about this rifle has come direct from them. Firstly, one of the oldest and boldest was a guy, a long serving Special Air Service warrant officer, who told us about the experience in Borneo of conducting claret operations. This was an operation where New Zealand and British troops, SAS troops, went across the border very covertly and shot up the Indonesian base camps. Indonesia was setting up on one side of the border and then infiltrating across to create problems. So they set up kind of a Mission Impossible scenario of complete deniability, sent the boys across the border, and they used to ambush along the waterways. The Indonesians were using longboats to move in and out of the area. And he told me that he could tell when somebody was shot. SAS were using both SLRs and M16s, something along the lines of this thing here. He could tell when people were being hit with 5.56 because they would simply slump down into the boat dead. He could also tell when they were hit with 7.62 because they were actually picked up and thrown out of the boat. Other Vietnam veterans have indicated that although this is a very long, heavy rifle for jungle work, really quite ridiculously overpowered, one of the cardinal virtues was the ability of the round to penetrate through cover. They were perfectly confident that if they had a VC hiding behind a tree shooting at them, that they could just shoot at the tree, and within a few rounds they'd have made a hole big enough for a projectile to go through the tree and clean out the guy on the other side. Our SAS, both the Australians and the New Zealanders, kind of being a bit of a law unto themselves, conducted some semi-authorised modification to this rifle. They converted it to full auto. Every old soldier from New Zealand, Australia and England will know how to do this. It's simply a 30-second job of putting a matchstick under the safety seat. They would do that. They would remove the flash eliminator and chop about 1 inch of the barrel. Many of them welded or bodged in some form, some kind of pistol grip to the front of the rifle, and they did this for the purpose of being able to achieve a clean break if they got contacted. They were operating generally in 5-man patrol strength. If they got a contact, 9 times out of 10 the drill was to break contact and try and get away, disappear. So the IA, in the event of any contact or ambush that they walked into, was simply to turn and face and then loose off an entire magazine of 7.62. With the barrel chop, that makes it an extraordinarily dramatic muzzle flash. It's a big bang, very, very loud, and that combination of noise and the flash of the muzzle flash apparently inflicted enough of a psychological shock that the adversaries would keep their heads down, try and get out of the way while the SAS broke contact and took off. Number of modifications made. I mentioned the matchstick. When these rifles were released into the civilian market, the police were very aware there was a great many ex-soldiers around who knew the matchstick trick, so they have removed a part from the sear mechanism and replaced it with spot welded a replacement part there that prevents people from being able to achieve this modification. You can replace that. You can take the spot welded part out and get a replacement part, bring the rifle back to its original configuration, which I have done, but I don't suggest that you attempt the matchstick trick simply because it's a waste of ammunition, it's illegal, and also there is the possibility of doing some damage to the rat's tail, which I'll show you when we get to strip and assemble. So that is the rifle once over lightly. We talked about the combination tool. You get a cleaning kit with it, you get a pull through an oil bottle and a brush. That's all but superfluous to requirements. You do need the combination tool, and the ideal place to keep it is in the buttstock compartment. That way, when you're out shooting, the tool is on the rifle at all times. You don't get to leave it at home. It's available for zeroing and assist you in stripping if you need to. It really is a marvellous rifle. One of the things which I've seen a lot of the YouTube shooters who perhaps haven't trained or been shot battle rifles before, there is a tendency to assume that you can shoot this in the same way that you can an AR-15. You just can't. It is a rifle that is long and heavy, and it lends itself, and you've got to take a very deliberate aim shot, and trigger operation is really important if you want to get any kind of accuracy whatsoever. The recoil is such that it will push you off sight, put your sights off target, and there is quite a period of time while you settle and reacquire. So the general rule is that you'll get one shot, one aim shot away with this 7.62 versus 3 pretty decently aimed shots with an AR-15. You can shoot double taps with this, but it takes a lot of training and a lot of ammunition and a lot of patience. So basically get away from the idea that this is a gun that you go out and go bang 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 with. It's a rifleman's rifle, aim, fire, and very deliberate spacings between shots. Okay, I'll stop at this point and we'll do a quick strip. I'll show you some parts, and then we'll have a look at some of the other accessories and bits and pieces that go with the rifle.